Guys, how are you? I am Chris Cole with Victims of Family Law for Kokesh. I am joined here by, I can't believe it, Dr. Warren Farrell and Adam Kokesh on the same screen. This is amazing for myself, being a huge fan of Adam, obviously with the campaign and the message of freedom. That is an awesome sweatshirt. And Dr. Farrell, the boy crisis, who I've been introduced to his work and just kind of just dove into your YouTube channel last night. I probably watched 30 videos to prep for this interview. And of course, like I did in college, I do everything last minute. But hopefully this is a fun interview and we get a little bit of knowledge out and touch base on a few current events. But guys, I want to introduce Dr. Farrell first. Dr. Farrell, introduce yourself briefly. Let us know who you are, what you do, and we'll dive into this.
Well, the most recent book I wrote is a book called The Boy Crisis, looking at why boys are struggling in all 56 of the largest developed nations, and actually looking at the impact of freedom on the development of boys. And so, and previously I had been on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women back in the 70s, and was sort of, I guess, the world's leading male feminist, if you will, and spoke all around the world on the importance of feminism. And then I began to see feminism morph into becoming very, very bureaucratic, very restrictive, very anti-male, very anti-family, very pro-government, and not understanding the value of fathers or family. And I began to sort of question it and the research, and it was made clear to me that if I kept questioning that way, I would no longer be doing 50 speaking engagements a year and earning a very good living. So, but I did continue following the research, and the research did find that fathers were really important, family was really important, and government was no good substitute husband. And so I started to lose, I went from 50 speaking engagements a year down to 0. And so it's been, economically, it's been a challenge, but it's, I feel like I've been able to speak the truth to the best that I know. And I don't think anybody knows the truth, but I hope I am at least reaching toward the truth that seems most appropriate to me.
God bless you for that, man.
Thank you.
Adam, I know you, but why don't we introduce you to Dr. Farrell's audience, because I'm sure we're going to share this on everything that we can. So Adam, tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Doctor, for joining us and for putting together this unique conversation. I want to say so much about Dr. Farrell's work and jump in and get ahead to the policy implications and how we actually do something about this. But yes, okay, while who I am is not important as what we are talking about, I guess the audience deserves to know who I am and where I'm coming from. I happen to be right now in Juniper Wood Ranch, northern Arizona, on my 10-acre homestead in No Forest One. We've got a day of working on the RV as we're getting around the country on the Kokesh presidential campaign bus, No Forest One. But anytime I have to introduce myself as a presidential candidate, as you know, I throw up in my mouth a little bit, because you have to be some kind of psychopath to want to be president of the United States, to want to wield this power over other human beings that shouldn't exist in the first place. So this platform is fundamentally different, and it really comes from the concept from Henry David Thoreau: for every 1,000 striking at the branches of evil, there is one striking at the root. And for all the great work that people do in issue advocacy, trying to fight government one piece at a time, well, the result is you might win, and you use the democratic process, and the powers that be will pat you on the head and say, "Oh, good little citizen, you follow the rules, you follow the democratic process, and here's your cookie and your I voted sticker. Now go back to being a good taxpayer." And that's, at some point you have to say, no, I want to get past this. I want to get to something fundamentally deeper, and that leads me to localization, because you might win battles here and there, but you win an inch, they take a mile behind your back while you're not looking and laugh at you. And we can celebrate things like cannabis legalization and different advances in civil liberties, but when it comes down to it, government in the United States, the federal government, is growing, and it is growing not just in size and economic power, but in oppressiveness as well, and policies that violate individual freedom, and the American people are suffering for it. So I see the way forward to create a free society, a voluntary world where there are no relationships and certainly no institution like government based on force, fraud, coercion, violating individual rights, is localization. The cure for polarization, right? We don't have to be forced into this singular system. We can get government down to the community level, because a community is something that is voluntary, that you choose to be a part of. And that's really the goal, is how do we make a better world, a more just, more ethical world. And to just segue back into the doctor's points about the global statistics, pointing out that it was 56 developed countries where boys are struggling. These are natural consequences, and you can look at these, and if you go issue by issue, I'm really glad, Doctor, that you mentioned freedom there, is like, the feminist movement wasn't really accounted. What's the value of freedom? Well, it doesn't matter, because we're centrally planning, controlling feminists. Now, just as a little language thing, since it came up, I think of myself as a feminist in the true sense of the word, in that gender should be irrelevant in determining an individual's rights. That's not what feminism is. When most people use that word, you talk about the feminist movement. It's a statist, use women's rights as an excuse for central planning kind of movement. So getting back to that idea of respecting every individual's rights, that core concept of freedom, when you look at the statistics on any issue, you go, oh, yeah, these are the consequences of violating ethics. These are the consequences of ignoring the non-aggression principle, of disregarding freedom.
Amazing. Doctor, what do you think about some of the things that Adam has just mentioned?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to sort of, since he's very constructive and oriented toward handling, social problems. Adam, let me run by a few things for you. So when I did the 14 years of research for the Boy Crisis book, some of the things I found are the following: that there is significant problems that boys are experiencing in mental health. For example, at the age of 9, boys and girls commit suicide equally, but between the ages of 10 and 14, boys commit suicide about twice as often as girls do. Between the ages of 15 and 19, they do it 4 times as often as girls. And between the ages of 20 and 25, 5 times as often as girls. In the area of physical health, boys, you probably know that boys and men's life expectancy has decreased for the first time in the last 3 years. That's never happened before, that any demographic's life expectancy has decreased. Boys has, girls haven't. Boys are dying sooner of 14 out of the 15 leading causes of death. They're 66% more likely to go between the ages of 25 and 31 to live with their family than more likely than girls are to live with their family between the ages of 25 and 31. In terms of economic health, boys are a lot more likely to drop out of high school, and boys who drop out of high school have a 20+% unemployment rate in their early 20s, which obviously creates an enormous amount of problems, because girls are not usually looking for boys on unemployment lines to be fathers, and they're not looking for boys who are living in their parents' cellars to be fathers, to be their future fathers. When it comes to education, there's 134 young women graduating from high school for each 100 males graduating from high school. So my first question to you would be, how, as a libertarian, would you address these problems? Because I think we could both agree that these are problems, and these are only the beginning of 50 developmental areas that I found. Oh, and I'll just share one more thing there, which is that I looked at 10 causes of the boy crisis, and there's a lot of them worldwide, but the single biggest cause is dad deprivation. And the dad deprivation, ironically, emanates from success. That is, in the 50 most developed nations where there's been the most success, there's been the most freedom for parents to divorce and for parents to have children without being married. And it's in that group of parents who are divorced and parents who have children without being married that there's a very high percentage of children who have minimal father involvement or no father involvement. And it's in those areas, those 2 areas of children without father involvement, where the boys who don't have dads, what I call dad-deprived boys, those are the ones that are suffering in more than 50 developmental areas. The girls, by the way, are also suffering, but not as intensely as the boys are. The girls, as I mentioned before, they're not nearly as likely to commit suicide. The girls don't do the school shootings. The boys do the school shootings. The girls don't join ISIS at the same rate. The boys don't commit crimes that lead to prison. 93% of our prisoners are males, but almost 80 to 90% of those males are dad-deprived males. Our school shooters, the school shooters that have killed 10 or more people in the 21st century, all 100% of them are dad-deprived boys. And so, so my question that comes from all this is, as a libertarian candidate, how would you go about addressing the boy crisis that I've just identified?
This is such an intersectional issue. There's so many different things that we can see in libertarian policy that's going to help with this issue. The divergence that you pointed out from ages 9 onward for male versus female suicides, how much of that is traceable to ADHD and other SSRI medications?
Those are the spoke, so fathers, for example, are far more likely to enforce boundaries. Moms are more likely to set boundaries. So a mom will, and therefore from the enforced boundaries develops postponed gratification. From the postponed gratification, there's less ADHD. So when we look at two groups of people, children raised predominantly by dads, only 15% of them have ADHD. When we look at children raised predominantly by moms, 30% have ADHD. And I can give maybe one really good example of that. Moms and dads will enforce boundaries set boundaries pretty much the same way. They'll both say something like, sweetie, you can't have your ice cream until you finish your peas. And then with mom, the children will go, oh, I've had such a tough day today. I'm really sad. I'm a little bit depressed. Could I just have my ice cream today? And mom's empathy will be, and her oxytocin will be stimulated.
I always knew to go to mom. I love my dad. I always went to mom.
And for sometimes these roles are reversed, but as a rule, mom will be more likely to say, I'll tell you what, sweetie, I said you can't have your ice cream until you finish your peas, but have this many more peas, and then you can have your ice cream. So the child learns from mom, he can manipulate a better deal. Dad is more likely to say, I'm sorry, but the deal is that you finish your piece. And then the boy will go, you're so mean, your mom's not like that. Well, you can continue to whine and complain, and then there'll be no ice cream tomorrow night either. Oh, darn it. With dad, I've got to focus on doing what I need to do. And so by focusing on finishing what you need to do develops attention focus as opposed to attention deficit. So that's
So I'm gonna I mean, that's such a huge question. I'm gonna take it like layers going down then, because the first thing, the immediate thing that I see as the best place to alleviate suffering is around the mental health crisis, around the suicides, around the school shooting. And that's very directly, you look at the statistics for how many mass shooters have been on some kind of antidepressants. And it's either all or nearly all, depending on how you count it or what statistics you use. And that's literally insane. But from this is something that I get from personal experience. I went to the VA when I got out of the Marine Corps, and I was having trouble sleeping. I spoke to a shrink for 5 minutes. I walked out of there with a brown paper bag, 5 prescriptions. 3 of them had suicide listed as side effects. And you go, whoa, wait a second. This is to help me sleep, and you wonder why we have, and they revised the number, it was 22 suicides a day for veterans. Now it's only 17, as if that's not still a huge national embarrassment. And the big thing, the very first thing is, to unplug the pharmaceutical industry from the government. There's a role for pharmaceuticals in society, but when you have government setting the policy by which those prescriptions are doled out, what kids get them, at what age, setting regulations and encouraging and incentivizing them through a corporatist insurance system that results in more prescriptions and less holistic treatments, then you're going to keep having these problems. So that would be like the first layer of libertarian policy is get that out of the way. Now, the family structure stuff, right? How, about having fathers around in a child's life, that is a hugely complex problem that we can point out a dozen different ways that government has made it worse and made it disincentivized for fathers to be a part of their children's lives. And this is why I'm so grateful that Christopher Cole is doing this, because he has had a great job with victims of family law for Kokesh and helping people identify as victims of family law to say, yeah, I got screwed over by the system here. I went through not just a bad divorce, but a fundamentally unfair divorce. And the push for equal shared parenting, I think, as again, sort of second level, not getting all the way deep, but just getting one level deeper, getting better, getting the family courts reformed so that there's less corruption, so that you don't have the incentive for separation, for child support, for taking away equal shared parenting. So I think that's a huge one. And how we get that, like, again, I'm not saying, hey, I'm the central planner, I'm going to come in and design a system. We have a system, we see why it's not working. How do we transition it to a better one? Again, localization. You get government down to the community level, get rid of the federal government. And this gets to the next thing with the federal welfare, right? Because the federal welfare system, as you said, there was a point of realization where the government's not a very good surrogate father. And it is in many ways tried to be. And when you look at what is government, a territorial monopoly on authority, on coercion and the initiation of force, it's a pretty disgusting thing. When you try to break it down into gender terms, it's men attacking men. And that's really sad when you realize that that's what it is. That and I'm not here to talk about the patriarchy and it's all men in control of everything, but who are the trigger pullers? Who are the policy setters? Who are the ones who really go in and aggressively exploit society in a way that corrupts family courts, that corrupts charity into welfare, and creates all these incentives for single parents?
And if I may, real quick, Adam, it's almost like they weaponized, the men weaponized the women to monetize the children, to use the men. And that seems to be how it trickled down.
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you pointed out that way, Chris, because it's not as simple as men attacking men in this case, because then it would be obvious. But, I will say in one situation, and this is definitely related to this because it goes with all the racism issues and the criminal justice reform issues that go along with this. Look at the drug war. Look at the drug war, racial disparities in arrests. That's men attacking men for, with the excuse of, you did a drug that I don't like. You put a plant in your body that the pharmaceutical companies don't want to be legal, so we're going to attack you. We're going to lock you in a cage. We're going to give you this scarlet letter of now you're a criminal, now you're an unfit father, now you're going to be even more disadvantaged in the system. And when it comes to minorities, this is the new Jim Crow, right? This is how racism is expressed in policy in the drug war. You can say, is the policy racist? Maybe not, but the statistics don't lie. One way or another, in the reality of this policy, there's definitely a racial discrimination factor. And black men, not even women, but specifically black men, are the biggest victims of the drug war and of government as a whole. You could say all the racist sentiment among white Americans, instead of being open in the KKK or part of the fabric of society, has now just been absorbed into government and is expressed in this policy. I wanted to get to the one last point here, because this is the one that transcends all of this. Because all of these reforms, we can say, we have our plan for a centralized solution, but the ultimate goal is to get government down to the community level. It's kind of like a Chinese finger trap with welfare. You can't say, well, we're just going to get rid of all the welfare and pull the rug out from underneath people who have become dependent on it. But if you localize it, communities can come to a better way of supporting families and especially fathers and keeping families together, as opposed to the incentives that you have with the federal welfare system for single parenting.
Well, there's only about 14 levels of discussion.
I could have kept. I want to stop myself
We can do another one of these too.
I mean, it goes.
Let me dig in on one of these levels, Adam.
Sure.
I'm looking at the people who are watching this and know that a lot of a high percentage of your audience, Chris, has been through divorces. And one of the things I've been able to uncover in the process of doing the research for the boy crisis is what I would call the 4 must-dos if what we care about after divorce is the benefit of our children. And the number 1 must-do is about an equal amount of time with both mother and father.
Amen.
That has and Richard Warshak has come up with, looking at, had surveyed 100 clinical psychologists and researchers who had examined this issue and asked them to investigate that, and found that the closer that you get to 50%, that the better. That was called a consensus report. If you know anything about academia, you know that it's almost impossible to get consensus among 100 academics out of 100 academics. And so that's really very crucial work. We now have enough data to know that it's not just about socioeconomic background that leads to children doing better or worse after divorce, that children who are in school, who have fathers and mothers, and they're from wealthy, and they're from poor areas, the children from poor areas do better on math and science when they have both mother and father than the children from wealthy areas in the best schools do when they do not have the father involvement. That's just one of many examples of the way that we've been able to control the data very carefully now, to be able to see that it's not other variables like money that is important an issue as it is the father and the mother. And I hope I gave one decent example of that before when I talked about the boundary enforcement versus the boundary setting as to why. Number 2, the father and mother need to live within about 20 minutes drive time from each other. And when the father and mother don't live close to each other, the child ends up resenting having to go to the other parent because she or he is missing the soccer game or missing the ability to go to their best friend's birthday party or whatever. And so there is a resentment that occurs when the child can't have consistent, stable activities with its social network when the parents live more than about 20 minutes drive time from each other. Number 3, there needs to be no bad mouthing that the child can detect from mother to father or father to mother. Now, it turns out that when children are interviewed 5 years after divorces, and the question is asked, this is Gwyneth Walker who did this, and the question is asked, does your mother badmouth your father? Does your father badmouth your mother? Do they both badmouth each other, or does neither badmouth the other? Only 11% of children said that neither parent badmouths the other. But among the parents where only one parent badmouthed the other, the ratio is 4.5 moms badmouth dads to dads badmouth moms. So this is something that we can talk about the reasons for that, but it's real. But the power of badmouthing is that, particularly when a mother badmouths the father, is that the boy looks in the mirror and sees that his nose and eyes and body language is like his dad's. And he realizes on some unconscious level that if his dad is being castigated as a narcissist, a liar, or irresponsible, well, maybe he's a narcissist, liar, or irresponsible. So you're not just bad mouthing the father, you're bad mouthing the boy, and the boy has no place to go with that information. It can't go back to the father or the mother because it's afraid of further destabilizing the relationship that keeps it somewhat stable. Number 4 is that the parents, the children that do the best are ones where both mother and father have couples communication or relationship counseling, not just on an emergency basis, but on a consistent basis, so that on an emergency basis, the father and mother have a short period of time to deal with the issue, and they're likely to blame the other one. When they are at a consistent basis outside of emergencies, they can absorb the other one's best intent and make more effective and honorable compromises with each other that serve the child's best interest rather than their emotional best interest at the time. And so if you're listening here, you want your children to have the best possible life after divorce, those are the four things that are the four must-dos. It's all that's explained much more in depth in a chapter called The Four Must-Dos After Divorce and the Boy Crisis.
And we talked about divorce too, and I just wanted to clarify with Adam. We've never been married, and I know Dr. Farrell, you mentioned in your book also the statistics with unmarried fathers, and that how we're fighting for equal shared rights and all that. So Adam's always mentioning divorce. I was never married. We were together on and off for almost 7 years, have 2 children. It just didn't work. You know, and we're dealing with that in court. And unfortunately, fathers don't have rights. They have to go get their rights. But what I want to talk to you guys about, and I want both your input on that. And this was just some questions that I have that I think in the equal shared parenting community, and then, you know, people who follow the Boy Crisis, and you, Dr. Farrell, and of course, Adam, everyone on the campaign, and libertarians. I think this is the issue of issues that branch off into so many of the major issues. So I think it's a core issue. I would think that would be safe to say. So is the boy crisis a thing of evolution, or is it a lack of government implementing the Constitution? Meaning, is this government interference, or is this the natural evolution, destruction of our society? And yeah.
Well, ironically, it is in part a result of freedom, where we allow, you know, people to make decisions more themselves, and so people want the freedom to be able to divorce, and should have the freedom to be able to divorce, and they want the freedom to be able to raise children without being married. However, it's a lack of information. And we saw this. We've known this for a while, and it is related to government. So, for example, in 1965, Daniel Patrick Moynihan did something called the Moynihan Report. And he found that and he was asked to investigate the inner city community, which was mostly African American. And many people were afraid, oh my goodness, he's going to find that, you know, crimes are committed more by African Americans because they're Black, and this is going to be really racially igniting. But what he found was something very interesting, which was that the Blacks didn't commit crimes when they had fathers and mothers at nearly the pace that Blacks committed crimes when there was father absence. And in 1965, when he did that study, there was 25% of African American inner city community had father absence. And it was that group, that 25%, where the crimes were being committed, where the mental health problems were, even though mental health wasn't as sophisticated an issue at that time. And so now, today, in the Caucasian community, 32% of children do not have father involvement at significant points of their life. And among the African American community, it's 73% do not have father involvement. And it's so the issue, so we were talking about the problems with mental health, that problems with mental health are not significant in father and when there's mother and father both involved, but they are extremely significant when there aren't. And when I was talking before about the ADHD, which Adam brought up, when you have that ADHD, you tend not to be able to have postponed gratification. When you don't have postponed gratification, you don't complete your homework, you don't complete your drill for the basketball team, you tend to not complete things, therefore you tend to be a loser. You don't get as much positive feedback from the teachers. When it comes to girl time, girls are not usually interested in dating losers. They want performers, they want winners. And so the boy turns to porn. Porn addicts the brain to having dopamine when the sex gets more and more exciting. But when you meet a real girl, she feels like she's treated as a porn object rather than as a full human being. And she then rejects the boy, who's already feeling rejected, which is why he went to porn to begin with, because pornography is basically access to a variety of attractive women without fear of rejection at a price you can afford. And so
the internet.
What is porn? What are y'all talking about?
And what all of that happens from that is that the boy gets to, if he's at all prone in his genetics to depression, as a result of not being praised by teachers, by parents, by girls, he begins to get depressed, he begins to withdraw, he begins to become ornery, disobedient. And there's a real, and those are the boys who, when things get really bad, are suicidal. Those are the boys who, when things get super bad, are so angry at the people at school that have rejected them that they're the ones that pick up the guns and do the school shootings. Hence the statistic that I mentioned before, that 100% of the most damaging school shooters, that is school shooters that killed 10 or more people, 100% of them were dad-deprived boys. And so much of our mental health emanates from the lack of father involvement. And that's why when I started studying 10 causes of the boy crisis, I found that all of them had significant impacts, but they weren't very important unless there was a lack of father involvement. Male teachers are extremely important when there's a lack of father involvement, but it's not so crucial when a boy has a father that he does reasonably well when there aren't male teachers. So that's an example of what got me to put the lack of father involvement ahead of some of the other contributors to the boy crisis.
Well, Chris,
Adam,
if I may,
go ahead.
I think the way Dr. Farrell answered your question there was very good at examining what's happening now and the dynamics that we're facing today, and the modern understanding that he brings to it. I think I'd like to answer your question zooming out historically a little bit more, because you asked, is it the government not following the Constitution, or is it evolutionary? And first of all, the Constitution's not relevant here in the sense that the words on paper that government uses as an excuse for its authority are not as important as looking at the actual policy enforcement and dynamics and social welfare and all the family court issues. So I would rephrase your question: is this an evolutionary problem, or is this a government problem? And the answer is
Constitution, because it rhymed.
No, okay, sorry, I missed that. Excuse me.
Evolution, Constitution. I was trying to be cute, but thank you.
All right. So I think there is, and this is one thing that I like to bring into the conversation around libertarianism, is that there is a social evolution and even a biological evolutionary component to achieving a voluntary society. And just to zoom way out for a second, Steven Pinker, Harvard professor, we are living in the most peaceful times in human history, and violence follows a decline over time. This is human progress. Multi-cell organisms beat out single-cell organisms. Human societies that cooperate beat out human societies that are at odds all the time. And historically speaking, men have had an advantage in the physical realm over women, just the immediate physical power of our bodies in terms of providing goods and services that are essential for quality of life. This isn't to say women's role isn't just as, if not more so valuable as the baby makers, obviously, but we have in a way come to dominate economics. Men have come to dominate economic life over the course of human history because of that physical advantage. As of the invention of the internal combustion engine, that advantage started going down. And there's kind of a whiplash effect here, as all of a sudden, like if you have men and women, and men are valuable for physical strength and being able to get things done that women can't, and women are valued for being able to make babies. Well, you introduce the labor-saving technology, men's value goes down, women's value stays the same. But that ignores the psychological value that I think Dr. Farrell's work is so critical in pointing out, that the psychological impact of males in society, of that mentality of just having that as a complement to women, or as a co-equal component, however you want to describe it. I don't really care about this. There is this real dangerous, and I'm struggling with the language right now because I don't get to talk about this that much, but there's a real bullshit political correctness feminist thing where we try to seek equality between the genders, and it's like, no, human beings are equal regardless of gender. You as an independent consciousness have rights. That's why you have rights, not because your body has some physical composition. So jumping ahead then to this reactionary phase that we find ourselves in today, where we are so capable with technology to provide overwhelming goods and services. I mean, the consumer culture, we make so much trash, we waste so much food. We've come to this point where a single male using the state being tasked can support who knows how many single mothers. And we have this point that we're at now, which is kind of like a reactionary phase where men have to find a new place in society that's not, well, I'm the one who can lift up a 50-pound bag over my shoulder, therefore, I have to get paid more, and women can stay at home.
We have forklifts now.
Right. Well, at a deeper level of the boy crisis is the evolutionary crisis of men redefining our role in society in a world where, guns, like gun rights, guns are the great equalizer. Where, how else does an 80-year-old grandma get to face down a 250-pound mugger? Well, if she has a gun, there's a reason they called it the great equalizer. So I think Dr. Farrell's work is incredibly important in helping us come to the end, to rein in this whiplash effect. Now, to your question, Chris, how much is it a government problem? I would say it's a natural evolutionary thing that we would have with or without government, but government makes it somewhere between 10 and 100 times worse, depending on it's one of these giant immeasurable things, but the fact that we are productive and capable of supporting people with welfare is a good thing, with charity, not with welfare. The fact that we can create specialization of labor, that we can support architects, engineers, electricians, artists, musicians, as opposed to everybody being a hunter-gatherer, that's a great thing. So the consequence of government then taking over charity, turning it into welfare, creating all the incentives for broken homes, that's part of the sort of immediate whiplash effect of this natural evolutionary dynamic. And again, this is why Dr. Farrell's work is so important, is that as soon as people start listening to him, and I understand, and I have so much respect for someone who goes against the orthodoxy that they're a part of, like breaking off from feminism, where you go from 50 paid speaking gigs a year to 0. Yeah, I can relate to that in my own way, because for me, it was being an anti-war activist. I'm sorry, I didn't even realize this connection. I'll finish this and wrap it up. But I went from, for one, being in the Marine Corps to being a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War, being very active in the anti-war movement. And the anti-war movement, obviously, dominated by lefties. And when I said, well, hold on a second, I used to get speaking gigs. Like when I was active with IVAW in the 2007, 2008 timeframe, especially, when it was, hey, I'm an anti-war combat veteran. All right, come here, we're going to pay you to speak and speak at this rally and talk to these students, and here's another check. And that was all great. I said, wait, but I'm not a liberal. I actually believe in nonviolence consistently. I actually believe in this thing called the non-aggression principle. Oh, you're a libertarian. Well, we don't want to, we don't want to subsidize you anymore. And like I said, you can't. Is it 10 times worse or 100 times worse? How much worse are things just because the money that goes into dominating the conversations around this policy is set by, it's all money that flows from the Federal Reserve System, from the central bank, from the same central corrupt authority, the same super class. And before I get carried away, there's so many angles, and Dr. Farrell could probably speak to this better about all the various social engineering that's deliberately built into this.
I want to pick up for a second on something you mentioned that I very much agree with, which is the evolution of boys and men. And historically speaking, every generation had its war. And we called forth boys and we told them they were heroes, which was a way of giving them a social bribe to participate in that war and to be willing to die so others would live. And so when we talk about men having privilege, we have to reverse the roles on that and imagine that we said to girls when they're younger, there's a war, so you have to be willing to be disposable, and we're going to call this a female privilege. No woman would be stupid enough to say, oh yes, for me to die, it was female privilege. Yeah, sure. And that's female dominance. Sure. And so if women made rules to benefit women at the expense of men, it would be not be women will go to war and die and men will not. And so the thing that we call patriarchy is very, very precarious as a statement because it often
Yes.
means men dominate men. Men dominate and make rules to benefit men at the expense of women, when in fact, the rules that men made were designed to protect women. And men were definitely more violent than women were, but they were violent in the behalf, oftentimes, of making sure women would live and other men would not conquer their lands. And so everybody that lives in the United States, lives as a result in the United States as a result of our conquering, but it's women and men that both benefit from the conquering we've done. And so, women wanted the men, the mothers and the fathers both were proud of their sons who went to war, and oftentimes showed them pictures of somebody in the Marines who had died in war, who was their uncle, and he stood up. His picture was on a cabinet that the boy always admired. And so, now that was called male purpose. Boys got purpose by knowing that they could be a participant in serving and saving the country. And they got purpose out of knowing that there was a sole breadwinner in this, and his job was to be the sole breadwinner. Today, we need fewer men in war, and we need fewer men as sole breadwinners because women are sharing that responsibility more. So that's good news because it gives boys freedom, but it's also bad news because boys have a purpose void. And so what I discovered in researching the boy crisis is that the boys who are in trouble all have in common this purpose void combined with a dad void. And the purpose, one of the things that dad does through the enforcement of boundaries and creating the postponed gratification is he helps children to be able to achieve in any area of purpose that matches your child's personality.
Yes.
And so your child can have the freedom to discover his own purpose, which is the real long-term benefit of freedom. But that freedom, usually when a mom says, "Sweetie, you're a good singer. You should be, you should sing," the boy is delighted that he's inspired to sing. But if he doesn't have the postponed gratification, he never is able to do the rehearsals that are necessary to be a good singer, the best singer, to be the combination. The people who succeed in the world have persistence and postponed gratification more than almost any other psychological characteristic. And
well, doctor, if I may, just real quick, you're getting kind of personal here. I feel like I should go lay down on that couch behind you. For me, it was, I'm a product of divorce. My parents got divorced when I was about 10, and arguably one of the worst times in terms of the psychological impact. And they did it, as far as divorced parents did, they did a pretty good job, going back and forth and both being engaged and involved in my life. But I think about that purpose void. And while war in the past had been that, understood as a legitimate means of finding purpose, now we know that, war is obsolete. Fighting for politicians and government is not righteous. And I think this is part of the social engineering. It's very deliberate for them to say, hey, let's break up American homes. Let's have a bunch of fatherless boys because they're going to be easier to recruit to the military. And that was the case with me. I think for me, and I've never examined it from that angle that you just proposed and for myself personally. But yeah, I think in a sense, not having that complete parenting experience led me to seek a sense of purpose through the military.
Yeah.
Broken boys are easier to manipulate.
Yeah.
And it is true that the children of single mothers are the ones that are most likely to join the military and particularly most likely to join the Marines. You're
saying you have statistics for this. This is interesting.
Oh, yes.
You have it by branch. No, I was in the Marines. You have it by branch of service.
Yes.
I'm not surprised. No, because the Marine Corps is the one that's like the most hardcore, the most, intentional sense of, you have to really and the other thing is we have more than our share of gay service members in the Marines as well, because if you're a young man who's gay and you're joining the military to prove yourself, where do you go? The most hardcore, the Marine Corps. But yeah, the product of single mothers, you can so hold on, I just want to get this straight. You have numbers that back this up.
Yes.
That when
Adam,
a father leaves the household, the child is more likely to enlist in the Marines as a result.
In the military in general and the Marines in particular.
Can we do, so fellas, we got a few minutes and I don't want to cut anyone short. I think we need to do a part 2 of this conversation if you guys ever want to do that. Adam, there's a couch right behind him you can lay on. And maybe before you win the presidency, you could get on that couch and make sure that you're good to go.
Dr. Farrell, where are you located?
Just in Marin County in Mill Valley, which is just north of San Francisco.
Okay, well, we might be passing through at some point on the tour.
Please, let me, you better be passing through in order to win the president.
well, so the Libertarian California convention is in LA, and then we go to Florida, and then we go to New Jersey, and then we go to Washington State. I don't know if we come back through the Bay Area, but we'll see. We'll make it happen one way or another.
Absolutely. It would be wonderful to meet you, and let's go out for dinner together and deepen our conversation.
Before we wrap up, and like I said, hopefully we can schedule another conversation because this is a lot. But this is new, and I told you guys both I wanted to bring this up, and just a few minutes from each of you on it. I just want to read this to you, and then I want you guys to kind of close out and tell any of the viewers, any of your YouTube channels or your addresses, websites, books. Adam obviously has a campaign going on, but this is by Senator Kramer and colleagues, introduce the Unborn Child Support Act. And this was introduced on the 28th of January. And the senators have introduced this act on a federal level. And it says here, life begins at conception. Our laws should reflect that truth, especially when it comes to helping mothers provide for the welfare of their children, said Senator Kramer. If we are going to be pro-life, we should be pro-life, all of life, and ensure we give moms the support they need. Also, fatherhood is an important responsibility, said Senator Daines. This bill supports new mothers and their unborn children throughout pregnancy by ensuring the expectant father take responsibility for the new life they helped create by the moment the life begins. And I'll read one more. Fathers have serious obligations to the mothers of their children that start well before birth, said Senator Cotton. Our bill will ensure men live up to their responsibilities as fathers by providing financial support to the mothers throughout the course of pregnancy. There's a few more, but I'm going to stop for the purposes of time. Dr. Farrell, go first. Adam, finish it off, and then we'll do our little outros for this segment.
Yes, I don't see in that plan offhand something that confronts the orientation to for governments being a substitute husband. The discussion is supporting the women. I think we have to really back up if we want to change if we want to think outside of the box on this issue. We have to realize that it isn't women's body. It should not be women's body, women's choice. It should be when there is the creation of a fetus, there are 3 sets of rights and responsibilities that are involved. The right of the fetus to become a child, the right of the mother to be able to abort or keep the child, and the right of the father to be able to support or not support the child. I think any time that there is a conception, there needs to be a requirement that the mother report to the father, or find out who the father is through tests, and report to the father the fact that child has been conceived. And if she wishes to abort the child and the father says, no, I am willing to sign documents saying that I will support the child emotionally and financially, then the fetus's right to become a child rather than be aborted should be the dominant right in that type of circumstances if there's someone that can care for that child. And so when we get fathers involved in the rights part of the equation, as opposed to just the economic responsibility for the father, we're teaching every little child that men are more than wallets, that men have possibilities just like mothers do of taking care of you emotionally and financially. We know from the data that I gathered for the Boy Crisis book that children raised predominantly by dads do actually better on most psychological and social and physical success and mental health than children raised predominantly by moms. But children raised predominantly by moms or by dads don't do nearly as well as children raised by both parents together. If we want to create a no child left behind environment, we have to have no parent left behind.
Beautiful.
We have to encourage boys to be father warriors, to be engaged from kindergarten, first grade, second grade on, and learning the social and emotional skills that it takes to become not just a wonderful breadwinner, but a wonderful, emotionally intelligent and physical and health intelligent man. And then we will have a culture where we're not just debating between should we have the government become a substitute father or should we not.
Beautiful. Adam?
Well, hey, Chris, yeah, I got to make this quick and jump to my next interview, but I really appreciate you doing this. In terms of that policy, it just sounds like men in government using women and children as an excuse to attack other men. When is a life a life? As soon as the government says we can use it as an excuse to rip someone off. Now, life starts at conception. That's clear. How we handle that, involves so many other issues. But obviously, government is not the answer unless we get it down to the community level and it's something that's voluntary and ethical. So my website is thefreedomline.com. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you, Chris. Peace and love, y'all.
See you later, Adam.
Absolutely. And the Boy Crisis book is probably least expensive on Amazon. So if money is an issue, Amazon is probably the answer. It's in Audible form. I've been getting enormously positive response to the Audible version of the book. I read it. I spent 5 days in studio reading it myself. And John Gray, the fellow who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, is the author of all the chapters on nutrition and ADHD prevention without using drugs. So those, I think, are really good chapters as well. And then, but if you do have a little bit more money, I do encourage you to support your local bookstores. They're doing they make a major contribution to the community.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I have your book actually. I mean, I'm one of the people who downloaded it on Amazon. So I've been reading it on my phone. And I was going to get the audio book because I'm super lazy. And I could just listen to it on the treadmill. But Dr. Farrell, I would definitely love to have you and Adam on for more discussion. I think the two of you, his campaign, the Libertarian Party, the research you've done, one of the things that, and if you have a few more minutes, I'd like to just ask you a couple of questions,
Okay.
is with all the data, with all the people in the movement, with all the things that we know, not you spent 14 years doing this research, and by God, that work needs to mean something, and it needs to be more than book sales. And obviously you've sacrificed your career in many ways to make sure that this important information for not only our children, but our parents and our culture and our society and our world got out. And I think God will take care of you on that one. So don't you worry about it. But what is missing for the change? We have the data. We have people like you did all the work. We have these movements. We have everybody's seems to be social media thumb warriors.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we need to? You're an activist first. I think above all things, you're an activist. How do we have real change in 2020 for what is arguably the largest crisis of all crises that literally trickle down, causing so much problems in our society? How do we get change?
Well, yes, I see myself first as researching a problem that I sense exists and that no one else is addressing the solution for, and then exploring what are the solutions. Like when I first did when I first submitted the draft to the publisher of the Boy Crisis, I had 10 causes of the Boy Crisis. But as I got more and more deeply into the causes, I realized that the father deprivation was more important than the mental health, because the mental health didn't usually get triggered unless there was dad deprivation. I found it was more important than male teachers, because the male teachers were a problem even if there was father involvement, but not nearly as big a problem if there was father involvement, and so on.
Right.
And so then I sort of, there's some part of me that when I do research on something and it really makes, and the findings are very clear, that I feel like I'm being irresponsible if I don't also make an effort to do something about it.
Being
And
part of, you're a part of the problem if you're not knowingly have this information. You know, what's the saying? They say, you know, it's not those who do evil, but those who let evil do itself, or watch evil.
I wouldn't go as far as to say that, you know, there are other writers who really make major contributions and just do their writing. But I have two parts of me. One is the researcher, and then one is, in my personality, is an activist also, which is why I ran for governor of California some years ago. And so I just, whereas there's other people, for the most part, people who are writers are not, they're not inclined to be activists, and people who are activists are not inclined to be the ones to sit down and research for 14 years.
Sure, yeah.
So I want to acknowledge that everyone makes their own contribution, but my personality was such that, you know, when I research something, I feel like, okay, Warren, you need to do something about it now.
Sure. Well, that's great. I'm glad that exists in your personality.
Yes. And so I went out to the Democratic presidential candidates and I introduced them to the boy crisis. And I said, you know, are you able and willing to bring this up in the debates? And, you know, people like Andrew Yang and John Hickenlooper were very positive about it and talked about bringing it up in the debates, and Andrew Yang did. And then I went to the, I chaired this coalition to create a White House Council on Boys and Men. And that coalition started when President Obama's White House had created the White House Council on Women and Girls. And because I had my background on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, there was an outreach to me to be an advisor to the White House Council on Women and Girls. And I said, I'd be happy to be an advisor to the White House Council on Women and Girls, but there also needs to be a White House Council on Boys and Men, or a White House Council on Boys, Men, and Fathers. Yeah. And so the Boy Scouts endorsed it. They got outside of the Oval Office with President Obama, and Valerie Jarrett sort of took the agenda and said, okay, everything on the agenda is fine, except do not bring up the White House Council on Boys and Men. The girls only have this one little thing called the White House Council on Women and Girls, and we don't want the boys, a council on boys, to potentially deprive this girls' council of resources. And so President Obama never saw it. And so then I brought it up again, as I said, to the Democratic presidential candidates. But because I am multi-partisan in my orientation, I also approached the Trump administration, and they were extremely receptive. And we've had multiple meetings and talked about creating a father warrior project where boys are trained to be fathers as their sense of purpose. We're talking about a male teacher corps where teachers are trained, males are trained to be teachers in exchange for 2 years of serving or 3 years of serving as a teacher. They would get scholarships to be teachers, so the elementary schools have male teachers as well as female teachers, so that boys don't have to go from mother-only homes to female-dominated elementary schools. And so, and there's a whole series of other programs I'm talking to the White House about bringing about. And the Republican White House, of course, wants to keep government small. And sure. Part of what I have explained to them is that the boy crisis, and documented, is that the boy crisis costs the U.S. government about $1 trillion per year. And so encouraging father involvement in the best way of keeping the government small is by keeping the family strong. And so focusing on strengthening the family, even if that does require some government resources or government resources being rechanneled, has the long-term advantage of keeping the government much smaller. If we look at ISIS recruits, are almost all males who are dad deprived, and then look at the costs of the U.S. government spends on homeland security, you get a sense of the cost. If you get a cost of the school shootings and the mass shootings and what we do to prevent mass shootings and school shootings from happening, to say nothing about the psychological benefits of preventing mass shootings, but having father involvement would be the single biggest preventer of school shootings, even more so than mass shootings. And of course, father involvement would be the single biggest preventer of boys committing the type of crimes that lead to boys going in prison. And if we just look at what it costs each year to keep males in prison, and to prevent the crimes that happen that mostly males commit. We have and recognize that children that have fathers don't commit those crimes at nearly as high a percentage of times. Then we have a sense of how father involvement can be the single biggest reducer of government spending.
What's your take on those who say that a male role model period for those let's say the mothers that sort of take the kids away? Obviously in the family court system we deal with false allegations, things for child support, money incentives to take the father out of the picture, and then mom basically finds someone that is less combative or more conducive to her relationship, but you still had children with this other person. What would you say to that concept that some mothers believe that, well, just if I get him a better stepdad, a stepdad that fits my preference, then my kids will be okay as long as they got a good man around?
Yes, good. Very, very challenging question. I am a stepdad to two daughters, and I was and I've been involved with those daughters since they're 6 and 7. They're now in their 30s. And so when I started doing the research for my first book in this area called Father and Child Reunion, I was really looking forward to seeing the research that showed that a good stepdad could be every bit as good, if not better, than maybe a biological dad that maybe wasn't as good as I might be.
Yeah.
And, in my arrogance, and so I did the research, and I tried to dig for that, and did a little bit of hoping that I would find that
you were going to be amazing.
But let's say I was really a good, and I hope I was a really good stepdad. The truth is that a good stepdad does not replace a good biological father.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
In adopted children often have these loving, caring parents that are devoted to them economically, psychologically, socially, in every way. They chose to be parents, but the child at some point says, who am I?
Right. Identity.
My wife from a former marriage has an adopted child, and when we were having dinner with a rancher, I said, tell me about a day on the ranch. And the rancher said, I just want to tell you about this touching day I had when the parents of 12 of my ducklings were killed, and a female chicken took over the parenting of these 12 ducklings. And one day, the ducklings were old enough to wobble out of the barn, and they wobbled down the hill, and there was a lake at the bottom of the hill, and the ducklings just jumped into that lake and swam delightfully. And the mother chicken goes, "Ow, ow, ow, you're gonna die." And the adopted daughter of my wife from a former marriage said, she was only 8 or 9 at the time. She said, "That's me.
Yeah.
I'm the duck.
Right.
By a chicken."
Right.
And as much as Liz, my wife, cared and loved and devoted to Erin, she was not the biological parent. So
right.
I want to make 2 things clear.
Please.
The step parent, a surrogate parent, a male role model, is no substitute for the biological dad, or conversely for the biological mom. But that said, it does help for a good stepdad a good stepdad can be an important role model, not a substitute role model. But if you have a stepdad possibility in your family, you must read the chapter on how to make a stepfather an equally involved parent. The great tendency, biologically and socially, with a stepfather is to make the stepfather nothing more than an advisor. So the mother will ask the dad for advice and reject what she doesn't believe in and accept what she doesn't believe in. Whereas in a biological mother and father that are functioning well, they have a checks and balances type of relationship in which the mother has weight and the father has weight, and they
a partnership versus a supporting role. A supporting role as a stepfather. A partnership would be with the biological parent.
Exactly. And so historically speaking, with a father and mother, biological father and mother, there will be a natural tension between the father and the mother. The father will be prone to roughhouse and throw the kids on the couch and say, okay, you pin me down before I pin the three of you down.
Yeah.
And then the mother goes, oh my God, I feel like I have only one more child to monitor
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
But yet, I've never heard a father say, children that are roughhousing with their dads are far more likely to be empathetic. They're
Yeah.
far more likely to know the distinction between being aggressive and assertive.
Mm-hmm.
They're far more likely to have postponed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Dads don't say that because dads don't know that. Dads don't. And so, part of what I've devoted the boy crisis to is to explaining what the data is that says, here are 9 or 10 different male styles of parenting, dad style parenting.
Right.
Here's mom style parenting. Here are the normal differences between those two styles of parenting. Here's why both need to be meshed. Here's why, yes, you need to do boundary setting, but you also need to do boundary enforcement. Here's why the child needs to not be prevented from climbing the tree, but needs to not climb that tree too high. Here's why you need to be out under the tree without your cell phone when that child is climbing the tree, et cetera, et cetera. And so all these things are natural propensities that have grown up over the millennia that are the differences between males and females, and lead to why it is important to have both. However, again, if you can't get a biological dad in your life, do make sure that if you're a faith-based person, that you get your child involved with a good faith-based leader who is not only a faith-based leader, but also gets your son involved with other boys his own age, where he's encouraged to express his feelings and share what is behind his mask that
Right.
as a boy he tends to repress. And
Right.
then he'll feel less lonely, less alone. Get your son involved with Cub Scouts, get your son involved with Boy Scouts, and get your son involved in 3 types of sports, what I call in the Boy Crisis book, the liberal arts of sports. The most important is team sports.
Mm-hmm.
The second most important is pickup team sports, and like going to a school and picking up a game.
Sure.
And number 3 is sports that are self-starting, like gymnastics or tennis, where the team is not as dominant as your own discipline. And all 3 of those are very important to your boy's development. Make sure you encourage coaches to be involved in coaching your son. So there's a whole series of things you can do if you don't have a biological father involved. But to understand, the most important single thing, if you're reading The Boy Crisis, to focus on is understand the value of the biological father and his propensities. Let your biological father know that you have changed your mind and you value what he contributes. Almost all men who feel valued will do more of what they're valued for.
Absolutely. Wow. I just want to tell you, thank you so much. I want to do this some more. I will get with your camp and maybe we can have more discussion. The Boy Crisis, I was going to look it up here on my phone and just kind of flash that, but you have an excellent display behind you. Very well done, by the way. It's very aesthetically pleasing. The Boy Crisis. Yes, I'm loving it, reading it so far. I surfed through the chapters to find things that pertain to the questions I wanted to ask. But I will definitely finish reading it. It's an amazing body of work. This is, you can't see it. I guess not. There it is. Freedom by Adam Kokesh. Also a great book. I heard on audiobook. So doctor, if you haven't read that or want to get an audiobook, that is a great read. Thank you so much. I would love to have you back again. Let's talk soon.
It's a real pleasure. This is real fun.
Yes, it was. Thank you. God bless.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.